Hey guys, so yesterday marked 1 year since the last time I broke a bone, which is a huge big deal, and I can't wait to show you guys how we got to this point and why it is a big deal. So, let's go. She asked me, son, when I grow old, will you buy me a house of gold? And when your father turns to stone, will you take care of me? Will you take care of me? So I have a very healthy family. I grew up really healthy. The only time I was ever sick when I was a kid, other than like flu or cold season, was the fact that I had asthma, and it wasn't too crazy or out of control. And in our family, we are kind of tough, where we have sayings like walk it off or just give it a few days and it'll go away, just stuff like that. So the first time I ever broke a bone, I dropped one of those old motor scooters on my foot while I was wearing sandals one day in the shed. It weighed more than I did. I was kind of little back then when I was 12. And I didn't know it at the time, but the base, the knuckle-ish part of my big toe split in half. But at the time I just looked down and I saw that my foot was swollen and red, and I was like, oh, dang it, well, better walk it off. So I just walked up the stairs, walked inside, sat down, and chilled out on the chair just kind of staring at it. And I remember my mom's like, oh, what's wrong? And I said, oh, I hurt my foot. And she looked at it and was like, let's go in the car. And yeah, I was in a boot. I was on crutches for about 2 months. I was in a boot for about a month after that. And there was a lot of complications following that. But yeah, that was the first time I broke a bone. I'd say 3 or 4 months later, we went to Idaho for fall break. And we were silly, rowdy, tough kids that decided to go on the back of a go-kart, and right as it was going fast, we decided to jump off and then we'd run back on, like in the movies when they jump off of cars and run back on. So we were doing that for a little bit, and then they decided to go faster, and we decided to just kind of sit and enjoy the ride. And my sister fell off the go-kart, and the last thing I remember thinking was, oh, I better go help her. And then I woke up in my brother's arms, and turns out I had flung off the cart. I shattered my skull. It had a crack. You couldn't see it, obviously. We saw it in the scan. That went all the way from one top of the ear to the other, and then right about here to where my skull meets my spine. So I was on heavy-duty concussion protocol. They almost life-flighted me over a state away. I was throwing up. I had a really bad concussion on both sides of my brain. And I was on heavy-duty concussion protocol for a few months. And that sucked, because pretty much when you have concussion, you aren't allowed to think. So I couldn't read books or watch movies or do hardly anything, or else I'd get a headache and have issues and stuff, so that sucked. But yeah, those were the first few breaks. A few months after I fractured my skull, I started having GI symptoms, and that's when I got diagnosed with celiac disease. Right after my celiac diagnosis is when everything started just going downhill. We noticed like I started breaking bones super easily. Since my diagnosis, I had broke several of my fingers. Some of my fingers are broken multiple times doing just like trying to pop them. Oh, it's kind of stiff, or I'll try harder, and then the bone snaps before the knuckle actually pops. That happened a few times. I've broken a lot of toes. I've shattered a few metatarsals doing stuff like dancing in the kitchen, jumping too hard on a trampoline, walking into the wall, in my sleep, kind of curling wrong and breaking. And yeah, I've broken a few ribs when I fell down the stairs on accident. I just slipped and bounced down the stairs. I broke a few ribs when we were playing Ultimate Frisbee. Broken my tailbone several times. Even just from like plopping down on a hard chair instead of just sitting down on it, I'd plop on it and break my tailbone. Yeah, it was kind of rough. And with that comes, especially at the youngish age of 13, 14-ish, with that comes bullying. And it wasn't the kind of bullying that you'd be like, hey, that's bullying, and you'd go and report it. It was more like my friends and some of my extended family members who didn't understand why I was breaking, and it was just weird to them. And it's natural for people when something is strange or weird to make light of it and to kind of laugh at it, because it's just like, how do you respond to that? So it wasn't that like bullying at school where kids push you around, more as it was, oh, don't touch Katie, she might break, don't look at her wrong, she might break. Or, how are you ever gonna get married if someone can't like touch you hard, or if someone can't give you a hug? And I'm like, people can give me a hug. And I was, in school there was some typical bullying. There was like, I was called Klutzy Katie, and they would like make a bubble around me and everyone would refuse to touch me because they didn't want to break me. Or someone would say something and someone else would be like, hey, don't say anything too rude or she might break a bone or she might snap. Or anyway, so there was some bullying, and it got to the point where I would crutch out of the hospital with a completely shattered fifth metatarsal. A very weight-bearing bone, totally shattered. And I'd sit in the car, and my mom would come out, and she'd sit in the car, and I'd turn to her, and I'd just start crying, and I'd say, Mom, please don't make me wear my boot to school. Which is something that you really shouldn't have to want, because honestly, even though I've broken over 30 bones in about 3 years, it doesn't mean that they hurt less. They still hurt a lot. And to be so embarrassed and so scared of bullying to the point of rather to be in pain and stepping on a completely shattered bone just because you don't want to get bullied, that it was really bad. But on the other hand, I got really good at adapting to life with a broken whatever. There was one time where I had my foot in a boot. It wasn't on crutches, so I was able to do more. And I went to a girls' camp, and they had an obstacle course where you like go ziplining and then you climb on like a rope bridge from tree to tree and stuff. All the girls were scared of it because it was really high up in the trees. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so me, in a boot that goes all the way up to my knee, I would go across this rope bridge and the zip line, and everyone's like, should we tell her no? Like, well, I guess she's doing okay. So, I mean, that happens a lot when I just go ahead and do something and people don't know how to respond. Like, should she be doing that? So I also once went to a trek where we all dressed up like pioneers, and we went over this like prairie, and we crossed some rivers pulling handcarts to like reenact. And I did all that in a boot, you know, crossed a river with my foot in a boot. And honestly, that's probably why I was in a boot longer than most people are, because I didn't give it too much of a chance to heal like I should have. But I got really good to adapting. My mom actually started cutting my casts, and it was a fun thing for her to do with her Dremel. Honestly, every time she did it, I was terrified, but she never cut me or anything, and it got to the point where whenever I'd walk out of the doctor's office with a cast, instead of scheduling a follow-up, he would just say, hey, if it doesn't hurt anymore, then your mom can cut it off in about 8 to 10 weeks. So that was a fun thing that we were doing adjusting-wise as well. And then we found out about gluten detection dogs and Piper. And around that time, we had learned from my doctor that she thought earlier I had some sort of osteoporosis. Usually you only hear about it in older people. We later found out that because I had celiac disease, my intestines were damaged and I had a harder time absorbing calcium. So I'd get teased and say, oh, you should just drink more milk. And I honestly drink a lot of milk, and I do a lot of dairy stuff that I probably shouldn't. I even took like calcium supplements and stuff that didn't really help. So the thing is, with the damaged intestines, no matter how much I took in, my body would just flush it out because it was damaged and didn't know to take it in. So when we found out about gluten detection dogs, we started training Piper with my trainer, and our intent was to teach her how to detect gluten and also how to do some mobility tests like opening doors and picking stuff up for me when I have broken bones. So I even, with the whole adapting idea, I even trained a lot with a cast. And I got an eye walk, and I decided to train Piper just using that. Like, I never really took a day off when I broke a bone because I wanted Piper to get used to the idea that this is just how life is. And yeah, so I did a lot of training with broken bones that, like, honestly, broken bones aren't that big of a deal to me anymore because you can just work around it. About 6 months into Piper's training, when she was mature enough and she was good enough to check all of my food so that she would tell me if there was gluten in it or not, like just little tiny bits of cross-contamination that I wouldn't have known. So after I started using her full time, we noticed that I had like a month or two streak of like not breaking bones, and we were like, oh, that's really cool. And kept getting a longer and longer and longer streak, and it was like a pleasant surprise, like this is great. And one day I had to get an endoscopy for something else, and while the doctor was in there, he noticed that my small intestines looked like really healthy, like strangely healthy, where in the past they were not. And that's when we realized that after several months of being completely, truly gluten-free, my intestines had a chance to heal, and I haven't broken a bone since. And so yesterday marked 1 year since I hadn't broken bone, whereas in the past, for over 3 years, I had an average of breaking, it was a little less than 1 bone a month. So I would break one a little more than every other month. And that was an average, that was just math. Like, I usually break 3 ribs at a time. I've never broken just 1 rib. Or like broken several bones in my hand or something. So that's just an averaging, but going from breaking bones all the time to not for a whole year now has been super exciting. There have been so many times where something crazy happened to me. Like, I once got attacked by an angry cow who apparently was very protective of her baby, and my whole arm swelled up. I was bruised all the way down, and we went and we got it x-rayed, and we were ready for the worst news, and the doctor's like, your bones are really, like, they look really healthy, and it was not broken or anything. And another time I fell into this ditch, and my finger, it broke the skin, the bone dislocated, broke the skin, relocated, and then swelled up and turned blue before we even got to the ER. We got there, we were like, okay, this is gonna break anybody. Like, this isn't just like, if it's broken, it's not because I'm brittle, it's just, it would have broken anyone, and it didn't break. It tore my tendon, and I had no feeling in that finger for about 6 months, but my bone did not break. It was really cool. So yeah, now we're here, and it's been a whole year, and I am just so happy and excited, and I hope to keep going. And I just wanted to share that with you guys, and just remind you that if someone has something unusual about them or weird about them that you don't understand and you don't know how to treat, consider the way they feel and how it is for them. I totally understand that sometimes, like, it's kind of weird, like, why would someone keep breaking bones? And it's natural to make light of it and kind of joke around with it, but it could hurt people's feelings. So just keep that in mind next time you see something weird about someone. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you.